Okay, so the Genesis creative process, an in-depth breakdown of the creation story from the Genesis idea. So we're going to do a detailed understanding and explanation of the Genesis creative process, and it's essentially the creation story of the Bible. Okay, this is where everything begins. And Moses, who has been attributed as the writer of the book of Genesis and the first 5 books of the Bible, which is referred to as the Torah, Moses was using the creation story as an allegory to express an eternal idea. Okay. And so we're going to take a deep dive into that right now. All right. So Genesis 1:1. So this is the King James Version as the first line in the Genesis is written. And it reads on this wise: in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay. So that's the first line in the first book of the first chapter of the Bible. Now, at the bottom, we have the line as is written in Ivrit or in Hebrew, and that is Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et haaretz. Okay, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et haaretz. All right, so the first thing you need to understand about the Hebrew language is that when you are reading or writing it, it's written from right to left. So when you're reading it, we're reading it from the right side of the screen all the way until we get to the left side of the screen. So it's the exact opposite of English, where English is read from left to right. The second thing about Hebrew is that Hebrew was written, especially pertaining to the scriptures, it was written in what's referred to as a literal language. It was written from a concrete perspective, which means that the language, the writing itself, and the books that were written in Hebrew itself can be understood via, the 5 senses. It's something that is based on an action. Okay, so you can, understand Hebrew from a literal perspective almost, but at the same time, Hebrew, like I mentioned earlier, is layered. Sometimes the Bible, when you read it, it seems very simple and very literal, very direct. But at times there is a dual or layered meaning to the Hebrew, where what's written is actually being used as a metaphor to understanding another idea. Now compare this to English, where English is written from what's referred to as abstract thought, where there's terms are used and words that are used in the English language that have no direct connotation whatsoever. And you can't really, comprehend them from the 5 senses. So when you are reading the Bible specifically, and you're reading it in English, you have to understand that there are a lot of mistranslations that have occurred, whether it been by mistake or on purpose. And, these mistranslations can cause errors in the understanding of what is actually being expressed in the Hebrew thought. So in order to comprehend the Bible in its original language, you have to possess what's referred to as Hebrew thought. All right. Hebrew thought is very concrete. It's very direct. All right. You can understand and comprehend it, via, taste, touch, sound, the 5 senses. And like I mentioned, specifically in the Genesis, there are deeper meanings to the scripture as it's being written. That's what we're going to do. We're going to break this first line in the Genesis 1:1 down, where we can begin to extract this eternal concept. So Hebrew is, like I mentioned, the English word for Ivrit. All right, Ivrit is how you pronounce and say Hebrew, and when you're understanding and describing the Hebrew language or the Hebrew culture, you say it in its original tongue, Ivrit. And in the Bible, especially in Genesis 1:1, when you see the word God in English, it's actually written Elohim. So this is the Hebrew lettering and spelling of the title of God that we first come in contact with, which is Elohim. And Elohim is a very important concept to understand. because Elohim essentially can refer to the creator, and we would refer to them in Hebrew, his personal name, as Yah or Yahweh. But Elohim can also mean and be referred to as angels or the whole powers of the creator, okay, or be used to describe the greatness of the creator in its many facets as it's perceived throughout creation. The creator is a spirit, and the creator wasn't meant to be understood or worshiped as a literal thing, but the creator being a spirit is a concept that's expressed in all things. You can see the creator in another person. You can see the creator in nature. You can see the creator in anything that's being produced from a spirit that has Yah in mind. And so since everything is expressed from the perspective of being a reflection of the creator, you'll see the title of Elohim being used. All right. So the first word in the first verse of Genesis 1:1 is Bereshit. Okay, Bereshit. And Bereshit, even though in the English it says in the beginning, it's important to understand that Bereshit doesn't actually specify a specific beginning. When you literally define the word and term Bereshit, it literally means in a beginning or in beginnings. Okay, so it's not specifying a specific beginning. It's more of a generalized term. So it means like in beginnings or in a beginning, the creator, creates the heavens and the earth. And that's a very important point to understand when it comes to the Genesis creative process, because like I mentioned earlier, Moses isn't specifically trying to write the creation story so we can all just understand how the physical creation was created. He's expressing an eternal ideal. So he's using the creation story to express this deeper meaning, this deeper point, okay, that in beginnings, in the start of anything that Yah creates, Yah is creating the heaven and the earth. And when you put that into the actual line from the Ivrit understanding, that's in a beginning, Elohim creates the heavens and the earth. And breaking that down from an eternal perspective, an eternal idea, this is how you express it. Okay, in all new beginnings, Elohim creates new regenerative minds, which establish new regenerative institutions, systems, and cultural formations. And this is from the document Helping You Conceptualize the New Heaven and New Earth by Minister Kazriel Ben Yehuda. Now, when you take the English vernacular of 1:1 and you break it down from the Hebraic understanding, it's an eternal concept. So that means that it's not literally talking about one specific creation or one specific time period. It's expressing an idea that when the creator begins to create in his image, at that point, he's creating, heavens. And the word heaven in Hebrew is Habashamayim or Bashamayim. And that can literally be expressed as, the literal heavens when you look up in the sky and you see the heavens, or it can be expressed as an idea. So a Habashamayim is, literally the two words put together. Habash is literally looking up or upper, and Mayim is the word for water. So in Hebrew, when you break it down, the word Habash-Mayim, it's literally saying the upper waters. Okay, and that's because, the heavens, when you look up in Hebrew understanding, things that take place in the heavens are a reflection of what's taking place on earth. So the same way as looking at, and looking in a mirror, or you look at, water in a still lake or river, you see a reflection. So from Hebrew understanding, everything that's taking place on earth is being reflected in heaven and vice versa. And it's keen to the term as above, so below. Everything has a relationship to itself. So heavens in this concept isn't just talking about the literal heavens, but it's referring to the conscious mind. And this conscious mind is where all new beginnings take place in people. It takes place in your consciousness. That's where all new ideas are formulated. And from those ideas are manifested through your actions. So in the beginning, Elohim creates new regenerative minds. It's a new heaven in which he establishes at that point regenerative institutions, which are tangible systems on earth. And these tangible systems are things that people can plug into and see as being a reflection of the creator. So it starts in the mind, which is in this instance is referred to as the heavens. And then at that point, when Yah plants that idea in your mind, it's manifested through your actions, and it creates a tangible environment, a tangible reality, which we refer to as institutions or systems or cultures. So in the Genesis, the writer of the Genesis, Moses, is expressing this eternal idea that the creator was creating in his image, and he was creating mankind to represent his interests on earth by giving him his mind. And at that point, from there, they can establish his institutions. And it's very important that we comprehend this from the eternal idea, because you can read Genesis 1:1 and just think it's literal. Because in Genesis 1:1, it states, in the beginning, God creates heaven and earth. And then you would think, okay, he's just talking about the creation process. That's it. But no, he's also talking about, more importantly, the process in which the creator begins to move on a people and begin to put his mind, his spirit inside a person's consciousness. And at that point, it manifests specific ideas, which manifests specific actions, that creates at that point on earth institutions that are regenerative or that give life. Okay. So when you break down the word bara in Hebrew, which is the second word after Bereshit, bara, even though it's been translated in English as the word create or created, in the Hebrew tongue is more accurately translated as to fill or to fatten. So it'd be read, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and earth. It'd be translated to, in the beginning, Elohim filled or fattened the heaven or the earth. Okay, that's a very important idea to understand, because when you get to the second line of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 2, it says, the creator at that point began to see that the earth was without form or void. All right. So in other words, in Hebrew, it says it was empty. All right. So there was nothing there that Yah can see was reflecting his image. So at that point, he had to fill it with something. Okay. It was a void. So that void had to be filled with something. So the word filled or fattened is more accurate in Hebrew. So when you say this line 1:1, in the beginning, Elohim filled the heavens and the earth, it's more accurate when you begin to look at it from the eternal idea and you begin to compare it to the second line, which means that, when he saw the earth, it was, without form and it was void. It was empty. Now he began to fill it. He began to fill it with what? His spirit. Okay. So we broke that verse down, Genesis 1:1, from the eternal perspective. So now we're going to continue on through the rest of the writing. And we have to, as we read it from this eternal understanding. So day 1,